Definitely Maybe, the classic debut album from Oasis, is celebrating its 30th anniversary this week. And I'm joined by my friends Hector and Ryan to talk about the legacy of this amazing album, the impact that it's had on our lives, and why it still kicks ass 30 years later. Let's talk Definitely Maybe right now. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Nick here with you. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to a special classic retrospective album review for the 30th anniversary of the classic Oasis debut album, Definitely Maybe, that came out on August the 29th, 1994, 30 years ago. This week, it went on to become the fastest selling debut album of all time in the UK back in 1994. And for this classic album review, I'm joined by a couple of special guests. First off, we have Hector, I guess the British dude on a couch for this edition. Hector,
almost Liam on the couch.
yeah. Hector Gallagher joining us on this episode, the chill dude on a couch.
The Puerto Rican Oasis member.
Yes, for sure, the long lost member. And we're also joined by a good friend of mine, Mr. Ryan Charco. How's it going, Ryan?
Good, Nick. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Can't believe it's been 30 years since this record came out, but I guess that's time for you.
Yeah, it's just making us all feel old for sure.
Yeah.
And your background is the Morning Glory Street. That is Berwick Street in London. We've been there.
That's right. Yeah, we have. Yeah, I took this the last time I was there in November of 2022. I was to make my way down there. There's not as many record stores as there used to be, but there's still, a decent amount, and it's a nice stop on my walking route, usually the first or second day I get there.
Nice. Yeah, it's always a good place to go. Yeah, I remember finding some good records the last time we went, and maybe some Oasis. I'm not too sure. I don't really remember, but definitely some
probably.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we're here, guys, to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Definitely Maybe, do a little bit of a retrospective look back at the album and kind of how we discovered it. Obviously, Definitely Maybe, one of the greatest debut albums, one of the greatest rock albums of all time, gave us classic singles like Supersonic and Shaker Maker, Live Forever, Cigarettes and Alcohol, and obviously cemented Oasis as one of the best bands of all time right out of the gate, right with that first album. A lot of bands wish they had debut albums like that one. But before we get to talking about Definitely Maybe, obviously this has been a very big week for fans of Oasis, because the long-awaited reunion between Liam Gallagher and Noel Gallagher has happened this week. It's been a lot of big news. Everybody's talking about the reunion shows they're going to be doing in the UK and hopefully around the world. So before we get to talking about Definitely Maybe, I just want to get your quick thoughts about the reunion. So Hector, we'll go with you first. You didn't stay up until 3 a.m. like I did to talk about it. But what did you think about this reunion news? Are you excited?
Not even if Jesus Christ rose from the grave, I wouldn't wake up for anything. So my thoughts. I still think they hate each other, but they probably called each other. They're like, we have a good thing going on, man. Like the people want it. Like they don't even have to talk. They just need to like sing songs. I thought that the pictures are funny because they're not. They're like they look like they look like, please, let's take a picture for the class reunion or something.
Smile, boys.
And they're like not having it, but yeah. I think obviously when I heard it, I'm like, yes, I think this is a reunion that everyone wants. I've never seen them live. They haven't never come to Puerto Rico, but I would love to see them live. And I think it's something that the fans. I think people are thirsty for real music. Like we've had there's a lot of '90s band coming back. Like you had the Smashing Pumpkins, like kind of coming back with most of their lineup. You have like Incubus playing like the Morning View concerts. So I think people are clamoring for real bands and are tired of this like pop crap or hip hop that is shoved of everyone's ears all the time. So yeah, it's like if a band can compete with the Taylor Swifts of the world and all that, I think Oasis is the band.
For sure, Oasis versus Taylor Swift. That's going to be a big battle, but I think they can win it for sure.
And Blur should open the concerts.
Yeah, that would be something. Well, Blur got back together last year, so who knows? Anything could happen. So Ryan, what did you think about this news about the Oasis reunion? We've gone to see them in the past. We're both big,
Yeah.
huge Oasis fans. What did you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. Obviously, they haven't announced any North American dates, but if they do, I'll go. I don't think these are going to be like the best shows for big fans. Like it's going to be greatest hits, which is fine. I'm looking forward to it. Talking about the picture, I was not even sure they were actually in the same room. I was trying to see if there was any obvious photoshopping there on that photo of the two of them. I think I mentioned this to you. I'm curious to see who they bring along for the band. I was reading it might just be High Flying Birds with Liam, which is kind of a little. I think that would be a little
Yeah,
disappointing to me, considering who's out there. They could just bring back the last iteration of the band and maybe have Bonehead on for a few songs, and I think people would be happy. But they'll do whatever they want, and whoever probably maybe needs to take the least cut out of their immense payday. But I mean, I was thinking about it the other day. It's going to be about 30 years since definitely maybe 30 years since Morning Glory next year. When I was I think 5 or 6, my parents went to see the Stones on their Steel Wheels tour, which is '89 I guess, or '88 maybe, in Toronto, and that was about like a little bit more than 30 years from when their debut records came out. And I
crazy.
was just thinking we're just and I remember back then, the line was, these are just old men going out on tour. And I guess that's changed. I haven't heard that much of that kind of rhetoric about this, but it just got me thinking of how ancient that felt. The gap between the Stones coming out and that tour versus now, it doesn't feel like as long, but I guess when you're alive for those 30 years, they don't seem as long as 30 years before you were born.
Yeah, it's all old men like us who are going to go to the show anyway. So we're all
Hmm.
old. We're growing old with the Gallagher brothers, and yeah, that's crazy when you think about it. Yeah, the Stones be like, oh, those are old men, but the Gallagher brothers are up there too. They're up there in their age for sure. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Well,
been well, you're talking about the lineup, and I think I've heard various things. I heard Bonehead's probably going to come back for this. I would personally just like to see Oasis as they were when they broke up. So Liam and
Hmm.
Noel, you already have Chris Sherrock and Gem playing in Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds. I know Andy Bell is back with Ride, but I think
Hmm.
he would come back for this. I don't think there's really any bad blood in there because he played in BDI too. So yeah, we'll see. I'm excited about it. We have heard rumors that they're going to be coming to North America. There's going to be some Toronto shows at Downsview Park. I was Starstock was at Downsview Park, right, Ryan? Back in
Yep,
the
I was
days.
there. I
Yeah.
don't think they're going to get quite that many people,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's a. I've seen other shows there. I was able to play Edgefest there a number of years ago, and when they kind of shrink it to a non 300 or 400,000 seat venue, then it's a nice spot for a show.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we'll see if they end up playing in Toronto. I think they will probably announce some extra dates coming up real soon, so we'll see how that goes. But it's time to rewind the clock and go back to 1994 with the release of Definitely Maybe. So let's talk about our memories of the first time we heard Oasis, the first time that we heard Definitely Maybe, and our impressions of the band and of the album. So Hector, let's go with you first. What were your impressions about Definitely Maybe? Do you remember when this album came out back in 1994?
yes, I do. It was a big time for me. There was a shift in music because Kurt Cobain had killed himself. So it was like it went from grunge to like the Brit pop. And I remember listening to Live Forever on MTV. They had it as they had MTV had the boss, the boss songs, and that was like a boss song. I thought it sounded cool, and I like the attitude that Liam and Noel had. They had attitude. Plus, you have cojones when on your first album you name your first track rock and roll star when you when you weren't a rock and roll star. So that takes, that's the type of like thing that I'm like, yes, like if you put a song like that on your first record opening, that they believed in themselves. And I like that attitude that they had, but I also like that they had attitude and the songs were catchy. They were good with the melodies. uh, you could sing along to them, but also had attitude. So yeah, I even remember where I bought the album. I was staying at father's house in the south side of the island, and I saw the record and I heard a few songs. So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get this one. So yeah, I remember buying that CD uh, way back in 1994.
But back in the day, it's hard to believe it's been 30 years ago. And that's something like that maybe people don't do as much anymore. Going into the store and buying the CD, even though I still love to do that on release day. I'll probably try to do that this Friday and pick it up on CD as well. So Ryan, what were your kind of first impressions when you first heard this album and discovered Oasis? What is your story with the Gallagher brothers?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I've been on your show before talking about the Beatles, so I think we've established I'm quite a big Beatles fan. So, like, and at that time I was, I guess, 11, and I wasn't really listening to much else besides the Beatles and maybe some other bands of their era, and Criss Cross and Ace of Base. But anyway, we won't talk about
The good
them.
stuff.
But I think so. I remember seeing a piece about them on Nick, you'll remember this YTV News, like a
Yeah.
kids news show in Canada. And I think it would have been after this record came out. I think it was in between this one and Morning Glory. I want to say I don't remember specifically, but I remember very vividly being in the basement at my parents' house watching this, and then they kept bringing up the Beatles and didn't really play a lot of music that I remembered, but hearing them reference the Beatles so much, I think piqued my curiosity. And so when Morning Glory would have come out, I bought that, and then that was my leap into it. And I would have come to definitely maybe later, probably sometime in high school. But even then, I probably came to it more seriously around when I started university and started getting really more into the band
Hanging
after
out with me.
we became friends. Yeah, and like they were always a band. Like I loved Morning Glory. I bought Be Here Now. At the time, it didn't really do it for me, and then I kind of put them away for a bit. But I heard, you'd hear them on on Much Music or whatever, or the radio. So I knew they were obviously still a thing. And then I jumped back into them more seriously in my 20s. So yeah, I think that's kind of the long and short of it. I was mesmerized by the Beatles link, and then that's kind of what took me into their world.
Those surprised me too. With definitely maybe because like with Oasis, obviously there's always been that Beatles connection. Everybody always compares them to the Beatles, but when you listen to definitely maybe, it actually doesn't really sound all that
No,
much like the Beatles. It's more like a mix of the Sex Pistols and the Rolling Stones. It doesn't really a later stuff. When you put on Morning Glory, there's a lot of Beatleisms happening on there, and
It's
obviously
the
after that,
haircuts.
it's the definitely the haircuts. Yeah, the mop tops,
the glasses.
the glasses. Yeah, the like the one Hector has, the ones Hector has on right now, the John Lennon, Liam Gallagher round glasses. So they definitely had that look. And for me, like with Oasis, Morning Glory was my entry point, kind of with Ryan. Morning Glory was my entry point into the band when Wonderwall and Champagne Supernova came out. So I want to say I bought Morning Glory in '96, and I wasn't really. I think I knew they had a debut album, but it wasn't actually until a couple months later I was hanging out watching TV, probably Much Music, same as everybody else in Canada at the time, and I saw the Supersonic video on TV, and I was like, "Well, I don't know this one. This isn't on the album that I have. So where did this one come from?" And this is the pre-internet, so it's not like I could just go on my phone and just
No,
Google all the information. So I remember finding out eventually that they had this debut album, definitely maybe, and I was at the HMV in my local mall here in Hamilton, and I remember wanting to buy Definitely Maybe, which I have the CD here. This is the version I bought back in '96. So I had a choice. It was either between Definitely Maybe, or I don't know if you guys remember, there was a band called The Refreshments back in '96, and they had an album called Fizzy, Fuzzy, Big and Buzzy, and I had a choice between this one and that
You
one, and I made the right choice.
you chose wisely.
I chose wisely
I-
for sure.
if you had chosen the other record, it would have taken life from you,
I know.
like in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So
Yeah.
that means I'm the only one who was ride or die for Oasis because I bought the first album
Yeah.
first in
Yeah, you were there first.
1994.
You're
yep,
I
pioneering.
bought it before they were cool.
Yeah, exactly. We bought it. Yeah, I bought it after Wonderwall, so I was a
yeah,
bandwagon fan.
already. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, me too.
Yeah, but the thing with Definitely Maybe is like it's for me, it's like I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it's like it's a 10 out of 10 album. There's, maybe the subsequent Oasis albums. I wouldn't even maybe make Morning Glory a 10 out of 10, but definitely maybe I would definitely put as like a 10 out of 10. Every track on the album is awesome.
It's a great record. Do
Yeah.
you know there's a Ryan Reynolds movie called Definitely Maybe,
Yes, yeah. I
but
know.
it's not about Oasis.
I wish it was,
Yeah,
that would have
should
been
be.
awesome.
They don't even play Oasis in that movie.
Yeah, they could have gotten like
Too
Married with Children
expensive.
in there or something. Slide Away. It's a romantic comedy. Get Slide Away in there. That would have been really cool too. So, but also like the B sides from this era too, like from some of the singles that came out, Cloudburst, I Am the Walrus, Fade Away, Listen Up, Do You Want to Be a Spaceman? There's like a million different like songs that they didn't even put on this album that are all fantastic.
Yeah,
And then
I was watching. Sorry, I was watching that documentary that they put out for the 10th anniversary, which was 20 years ago, I guess.
this one,
And yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I don't have the case. You're ahead of me there. I think I got rid of all my DVD cases, but they were talking about how he had. And I mean, this is common, I guess, when bands are kind of getting their first record out, that Noel had their like 40 or 50 songs ready to go. So it's not surprising that they had so many strong B sides coming out of this, and that they had stuff that they couldn't fit on. And I think that stretched into Morning Glory and even Be Here Now. They were always that a cool like B sides band, which
yeah.
wasn't that common at the time. I think that was kind of they're kind of one of the last ones to do that.
Yeah, they did. Well, they got rid of like the whole CD single. I want to say like not
Mhm.
yeah, like probably a decade ago. Like I feel like they were going strong for a little while, and then they dissipated the more we got into the streaming era. But yeah, it's like we definitely maybe I have the '94 version, so this is like the original, then the 10th anniversary DVD, and then the 2014
Mhm.
20th anniversary, like that, like we already feel old, but the fact that we've moved through like already three different versions of this record, and I'm gonna go buy the fourth version on Friday. That's either really cool or really pathetic. I'm not sure which one.
Uh,
Well, they got your
you
money at least.
you'll have to put a poll, and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
Am
people
I
will tell you.
pathetic? Yeah. Should I buy it again? Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about our favorite tracks from Definitely Maybe. Like I said, I feel like it's a 10 out of 10 album, so I would pick every track. But Hector, let's start with you. What are your favorite tracks from Definitely Maybe, the ones that stand out to you?
So Live Forever, because it's the first song that I heard from them, and I just think it's a great song. And I've seen interviews where Liam says that that's the song that if he had to sing a song forever, that's the one he would do. Uh, the other one I'm picking is Cigarettes and Alcohol, because it reminds me of going out in those times and going to a bar, and I was expecting to get lucky, but all I got was cigarettes and alcohol. So yeah, it's a great track. It's relatable. Like
Yeah.
how many people? I bet it happens to every guy here. You go to a bar, you're thinking you are going to get laid, and all you do is drink and smoke, and at the end
Yeah.
of the day, you go home alone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this was definitely the anthem for single
Well,
guys in the 90s.
well, you were in a band, so that made you cool. But I wasn't in no band, so yeah. And I like Slide Away a lot. I think it's a great track. I like the guitar on it, that it's a longer track. Uh, I like, I think it's a great album, but yeah, those three songs I would say are still my favorite tracks.
Nice. How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, definitely all of those. Slide Away and Live Forever are two of my, all-time Oasis favorites. Slide Away, I think they've done a number of different live versions over the years with Noel, I think doing more of an acoustic one at some point, and that one's really strong. But I think some standouts for me, like aside from those, Supersonic is one of my favorites. I've heard a lot of other versions of that too that they've done over the years, and I think there's an acoustic version of that. It's a very versatile song. Like it can come and like bring the power like it does on the record, but then it can definitely be slowed down and yeah, sung differently. Up in the Sky, I really like. I think
Right.
probably we'll talk about that maybe later, but I guess if you had to pick one that sounds more Beatles-y or Beatles-ish, I think that's the one. And I think on the version that they put out recently, the Mono Valley version, you can hear it a bit more,
Yeah.
just because of the way they mix the guitars. And I was watching back in the documentary, and they were saying how like if Oasis had like a political song, that might be it. And I guess when you listen to it, it's like, okay, I can see where they're coming from. And it's strange that they never really did, because of, you know, they did grow up on government assistance and not in the best part of Manchester. So it's strange they never did, but I could also see why they'd want to maybe get away from that. I don't know if it counts, but "Sad Song" is one of my
Oh yeah.
favorites. I love that song. And "Married with Children." I mean, now I feel like I'm just naming all of them, but yeah, I'd say "Up in the Sky," "Sad Song," "Married with Children" is just such a cool way to end an album, like especially one like this where it's just like just drives you, like it just the whole album just drives, like it's just noise, balls to the wall kind of record, and then it ends with this pretty song, and then yeah, and I'll throw a special mention for Digsy's Dinner, even though I think maybe that's the one people might leave off if they were choosing a track listing. But I was listening to it last night, and it's just so much fun. I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know. And it's also probably Tony McCarroll's like one of his better drum performances. Like he's actually seems to be doing a little more than some of the other tunes.
Yeah, no, that Dixie's Dinner is definitely one of the sillier Oasis songs. They kind of did that back early in the days. They did like Dixie's Dinner, they did She's Electric, these sort of silly, kind of a little bit Beatlesy, moppety kind of
Hmm.
songs. And yeah, Dixie's Dinner's always been a favorite of mine as well. With this one, like with definitely maybe with like Rock and Roll Star is still one of those mission statements, like Hector was saying, like this band coming out with this first song on the record, you know, being kind of arrogant with this attitude that we're rock and roll stars. So it's making you believe in the power of this band and kind of the image that they're trying to portray. Live Forever it's just one of those all-time great songs that's ever been written. It was the first song I ever learned how to play on guitar. And it's just one of those classic songs, whether it's like Noel Gallagher sings it acoustic, it's always been amazing. Columbia is one of my favorite songs on this record. It's just one of the best like early Oasis songs. It has a little bit of that Manchester house electronic kind of vibe to it, danceable beat to it. And always thought it has one of the catchiest Oasis choruses I think they have ever written. Supersonic, I still think is one of the best Oasis songs ever. It's the first song they ever released, and I think you'd be hard pressed to find another band that has released like such a great song as their first song, and it still sounds great too. The production on it is great. I love
That
Supersonic.
guitar, that sound that
Yeah.
they do at the beginning of the, yeah, so awesome.
Yeah, that riff is still
Yeah.
so classic, and I still think it's one of the best songs on the record. And then, like you guys were saying, "Slide Away," like really, it doesn't get any better in terms of a great rock and roll love song. Liam's vocal on that is just
Hmm.
insane. He sounds so good on that, and it's kind of funny when you think about it, because when it goes from "Slide Away," which is this really romantic love song, to "Married with Children," which is this very much anti-love song, right back to back on the record. It's kind of an interesting contrast. So those would be my favorite tracks on Definitely Maybe. And for this Friday, the deluxe edition of Definitely Maybe is coming out, which is going to feature a couple of different versions of the album, which is one of them is the Mono Valley version of the record, which is the first time that they recorded Definitely Maybe. They didn't think it sounded right, so they went back and re-recorded it at Sawmills, and they were releasing some of the outtakes from that version. So we haven't heard the full deluxe edition yet. That's coming out this Friday, but we also have listened to some of the outtakes that we heard on Spotify. So let's talk about some of these alternate versions. Like Hector, what did you think of these alternate versions from Definitely Maybe? Did you notice anything different about them, or anything you liked a little bit better?
Yeah, Up in the Sky sounded shittier.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It sounded, yeah, I can tell why they re-recorded it, because it sounded less good. But Colombia, I think it sounded a little bit like more like slower
Mhm.
uh
Hmm.
than the original. And Sad Song to me it sounded almost like the same. Uh so yeah. But yeah, I think the one that sounds the most different is Up in the Sky and Colombia, because, especially Colombia, because it's like a slower version, and I think also it's longer.
Yeah,
It's like a 7 minutes, so it's like 2 minutes longer, I think.
a lot more feedback at the beginning and a lot more jamming overall, I think,
Yeah,
on that version. But it sounds good. Like it doesn't sound quite as the same as the album version, but it's still pretty cool.
that's why they
Um,
trimmed the fat.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What about you, Ryan? What did you think of these alternate versions?
Yeah. I mean, I think with "Up in the Sky," I agree. It definitely doesn't have the power that the final version would have on the final version of the album. And I think that's going to happen with all of the Mono Valley ones that they're going to release, because I think it was just the production wasn't right. I think they didn't have the right, they just didn't have the right setting. I think they hadn't maybe gone through these songs enough. I think there was just something they weren't capturing. You can hear it in Liam's vocal. It's not as urgent. I think he's not as sure of himself. I mean, maybe some of the other songs he might be that they would have performed, like something like Columbia or Supersonic, that had come out or that they had been working on for a number of years. Again, going back to the documentary, Owen Morris talks about how he had his little brick wall box or whatever he called it to just like push everything into the red. And it's like beyond a wall of sound. Like it's just everything up. And when you listen to it now, like on headphones, especially, like it really still just bang, bang, like the whole record.
Yeah.
And I think that will be the main difference between those two. I agree. Columbia, I think they were getting it. And I went back and also listened to the demo, or the one, I guess the demo that came out on that cassette tape many years ago. And you can see how they like worked up to what they eventually got. And then with Sad Song, I didn't think Liam's vocals worked. Like, I guess maybe it's because I'm more used to hearing Noel sing it. I think it suits his voice better. I think Liam, especially at that time, I think that one was recorded, it said 1992. So that's, he's 19 years old. So
Just a baby,
I think he's maybe not, I think he could have, he was definitely had perfected starting to perfect the sneering vocal on something like a Rock and Roll Star. But I think, well, even that, I think he didn't get to that until much later. But I think the ballad, I think, wasn't his forte at the time. He definitely would grow into it later on. So I think that one was probably the weakest one for me. It's still a great song, but I wasn't crazy about his vocal on that.
Yeah, it's and then like you're saying, like you're not sure whether it's like it's is it his vocal, or is it because we're so used to hearing the Noel version of it that we've just listened to for the last 30 years. With Sad Song, I think it's the Noel version is definitely the one, because Noel at the time and even now was the guy who would sit down with the acoustic guitar at the shows and play the acoustic set and play the songs acoustically. He was always the one who went out and did the promotional appearances and played the songs. Liam wouldn't really be there to play those kind of songs. And he didn't really have the sneer yet on his voice that he would get a little bit later on some of the other albums. The Up in the Sky version was definitely, it sounded way more Beatle-y. It sounded like it could have been, alongside Rain or Paperback Writer or something like that. And then Noel's doing some really cool harmonies on there too that you don't really hear on the studio version, that I really, really liked. And then with Columbia, there's been so many versions of Columbia. I felt like they did 10 demos of it before they even released it on Definitely Maybe. There was a white label demo, there was this demo and this version and that version. It's just a great song no matter what. And I think with the Sawmills outtake, it just sounds like it's stripping away all the reverb and all the big distortion that we hear on the album version, and then you're left with something that's like, it's much more punchy, it's much more clear sounding, but it doesn't really have the appeal of the studio version. But I think that's how it is with all these versions. It's like, for me, when they release an alternate version, I'll give it that initial listen. I'll listen to it once, and then I'll just go back to listening to the version that I know and love, that I've been listening to for the last 30 years or so. So yeah, these alternate versions, I'm excited to hear the deluxe edition and talk more about those alternate versions. But let's wrap up this conversation. Let's just give our final thoughts on Definitely Maybe and 30 years of this album. Hector, what are your final thoughts on Definitely Maybe?
Well, my final thoughts are that this album still sounds great 30 years later. It sounds urgent. It doesn't sound dated, because I think when Oasis came out, they already kind of sounded dated. They had like that retro, so it's kind of like they already had that retro sound. And yeah, it reminds me of like great times discovering this record. I bought this one, and then the next year I bought What's the Story, Morning Glory. I think I bought physically almost all their albums. except yeah, I think I almost bought all. I had all their albums on CD, except the one I covered on Is It That Bad? I didn't buy that one.
Oh, that was Heathen
The
Chemistry.
Yeah, I didn't
Um,
buy that album when it came out. So yeah, but yeah, to me it still sounds great. And I love the story about when they were starting this, that they were going to play like a pub, and they had to like they threatened to burn the place down for them to play. So it's just a great, it's a great story. Uh, that they did that, and I think someone heard them, and that's how they
yeah,
got like their big break. So
yeah.
sometimes
Mhm.
kids, you need to do your stuff your own way. So yeah, I just think it's great. I just mentioned three songs because I thought if let's mention three songs, but yeah, I love the album as a whole. Supersonic, Rock and Roll Star. I think it's aged well. I have it on vinyl, the 25 edition. I used to have it on CD, but my parents threw away all my CDs. So
Oh no.
yeah. They're like, yeah, you don't need this shit. They're streaming now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
There's the internet.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I still listen to it, and uh you know, it's just a classic record. And great music doesn't have an age. Like it's great 30 years now, it will still be great 50 years from now. So it's just a timeless record that has stood the test of time.
Right on. What about you, Ryan? What are your final thoughts on Definitely Maybe? 30 years.
Yeah, 30 years. Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic record. It's an incredible debut. I think, again, listening to I'm keen to hear the Mono Valley version, like of the full record, because I was thinking today, like, would it have been like, I think it would have been well received regardless. But I think without that power that the product, like that they added to it with Owen Morris's production later on, that is what I think really broke through to people. And I think that the songs are solid, but I think that is what, like, it was just like a jet engine. And it's hard to make a debut album like that like stands as your, like, if that's like a lot of bands, their debuts are kind of, some people like them, but sometimes it's like either one of the lower, like one of their least sold records, or it's not so popular. But this stands alongside something like Please Please Me, which is like a real statement of, this is who the
Yeah.
Beatles were, and this is who Oasis is. And there's not a lot of debut records that do that so effectively. I think Arctic Monkeys is another, and the Strokes as well. I'm sure I'm forgetting some that I maybe don't listen to, but I think those four are like my really big key debut albums. And I used to throw on Definitely Maybe when getting ready for a night out, and like
Mhm.
I'll still do that, like especially with Rock and Roll Star, it gets you going. Like
Mhm.
it's just stepping out the door, and it's just like, you can take on the world. And it's
Mhm.
just, I know a lot of people come down on Oasis for being derivative and all this stuff, and yeah, they're not, it's not high art, it's not Pink Floyd. And I'll, if I want that, I'll go and listen to those
Mhm.
bands that I like that do that. This is just fun. It's positive, and it's about having mostly like having a good time. They would obviously get into, I think they would get into a lot more, I don't want to say advanced, but I don't want people to come at me, but they'd get into more interesting music later on. But I think as a debut and something that really stands the test of time, I think we're kind of going off of what Hector said. It's it was kind of, yes, dated at the time, but it's just a timeless style of music that they found. And I think this is probably one that even people who really maybe hate Oasis, I think this is one that even they will say, okay, yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
I think Morning Glory is going to have it. Like, I think that's a polarizing record because people hate Wonderwall, and people aren't crazy about things like Champagne Supernova or whatever. And
Those
maybe it was
people need
overplayed.
to smile more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think this one is like, you can appeal to a lot. Like friends of mine who are like super into punk music, they can appreciate this. I've people that have been like said to me that they hate Oasis. When I start digging a little more into what they think, they'll admit that Definitely Maybe, okay, I'll listen to that one. So I think of all their records, it'll stand the test of time the best. And I think it was an incredible debut, and it holds up.
Yeah, it definitely holds up. You're right, though. It definitely maybe there. Was actually I used to work with when I was working at Sunrise Records. our main music buyer, the main guy. He was a very like a big into indie rock, really knowledgeable music guy, but a little bit of a music snob, right? So when I started working there and he found out I was a big Oasis fan, he's like, "Oh, Oasis, 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 whatever." And then one day he's like, he's I was listening to Definitely Maybe yesterday, and yeah, it's pretty awesome. I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. You're right. It's the Oasis record for non-Oasis fans. If you're
Yeah.
gonna play them anything from Oasis, you play them Definitely Maybe. I would maybe play them Morning Glory, but anything after Morning Glory, you're just gonna lose anybody really. Here, listen to Be Here Now. This is
Yes.
gonna be your
Yeah.
first introduction to Oasis. Listen to, or like Hector said, listen to Heath and Chemistry. That'll be your first
Yeah.
introduction into Oasis. So, and with me, like it's hard to really it's not, I can't be understated that how much Oasis has affected my life, and really with this out with Morning Glory and with this one inspired me to be a musician, inspired my love of music, inspired me to be a music fan, and still something that it's just like it's an album that I put on all the time. I was listening to Rock and Roll Star last week and the week before that, and then now that they're back together, I'm listening to a ton more Oasis, and the album still just really holds up 30 years later. It's an absolute classic, and
Yeah.
like we said, in 10 years, 30 years, 10, 20 years, it's still going to be a classic record. So, celebrating 30 years of Definitely Maybe. And yeah, let us know in the comments, those out there watching this video, let us know in the comments what you thought, what your memories of Definitely Maybe are, buying the record, picking it up your first time listening to it, whether it be, people might have just discovered it recently. We've been listening to it for 30 years, but there's people who've been discovering it over the last 30 years. So let us know in the comments, basically what your memories are of Definitely Maybe and celebrating 30 years. So I want to thank my guests here on this episode. I want to thank Hector, the chill dude on the couch, so Hector Gallagher over there. Hector, where can they follow you and subscribe to you on YouTube?
So they can follow me at Hector the Shield Dude on a Couch on Instagram. I opened TikTok again, even though I think it sucks.
You're ready to be
uh,
called? We got called cringe, so we got to bring the cringe on TikTok.
yeah, I gotta bring the cringe, and so yeah, people, you subscribe to me and comment down below how many people went out and just had cigarettes and alcohol. Like, how many times did that happen? But yeah, no, like they can follow me on Instagram, on YouTube. I interview a lot of bands, metal stuff, punk, all type. So yeah, they can follow me there in those socials. And if you want to know about crappy albums, I have a series called Is It That Bad, where we listen to the most shittiest records ever sometimes. And sometimes we save them, and sometimes they're like, yeah, I know why they sucked.
Yeah. Well, I've listened to so much horrible music ever since I've been doing those episodes with Hector. It's been a lot of fun, but it's been interesting. A lot of
Horrible
pain.
music needs love too. It's like everyone needs love too.
Yeah, exactly. Even Corey Feldman needs love,
Even
and
Corey
Mushroom Head
Feldman.
and all the horrible stuff. But anyways, yeah, you can follow Hector on YouTube, and Ryan Charco. He doesn't have a YouTube channel, but he's a musician and he's a music fan. He's a Beatles fanatic. We've had him here on the channel before talking about all sorts of stuff. Ryan, do you want anybody to follow you online, or just do you want to
No,
start a
I'd
YouTube
rather
channel?
not. But
Do you want to stalk Ryan?
if you want to check out my band, we're called Volatile Youth. We're on all the streaming platforms and services or whatever. We'll be doing hopefully some recording if we can get our act together in the next little while. So some new songs will come out, and hopefully playing some shows in the Toronto and Greater Toronto area shortly. I've said that for the past year. We've only done one show this year, but that's okay. I'm sure next year will be better. But yeah, that's my band. But otherwise, please, no, don't follow me anywhere.
Right on. You can
Maybe
follow
I'll have
Ryan.
you on the couch in an
Yeah,
interview in the future.
Absolutely.
you
Oh
should.
yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah,
definitely.
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Making connections here on the channel. That's what it's all
Yeah.
about. All right. Well, you can follow me on YouTube. You can follow me on social media and Nick Chino Music. And then you can follow my band as well at foolsunion.com. But thanks for watching this episode of the show. Happy 30th anniversary to Definitely Maybe. And we'll see you guys again for another video here on the channel. Until then, rock on, everybody.